Hello and welcome. Can we hear me clearly? Can we start? Okay, let's start immediately. I'm going to quickly share my screen. Are we there? Now, so we're going to be we've looked at how to set up the database. And before we set up the database, we declare some variables that we're going to be using. And those variables are the connection variable, the cursor, and the variable that will hold the current to them. We initialize all of them to 0, and we're able to set up the database. So in setting up the database, just simply say, please mute yourself. Mute yourself so that it doesn't disturb the class. Okay. So in setting up the database, we simply created a function that should be able to do this. And that function, what did we call it? Setup DB, isn't it? So wrote our setup DB, and our setup DB is trying to make connection. And inside, once we set up the connection, we created the table. Isn't that what we did? So we created the table and we enclosed it in a try catch or try except block in order to make it, in case if there is an error, in case if the table is not able to be created, we want to put out an error message that can easily be understood so that we can work on the error message. So let's continue now. What we're going to be doing this time around is to create a submit function, the function that will be performed once we click on that submit button. What do we want it to perform? So we're going to create that submit function. That's what we're going to do. And we're also going to create the update late loss function. So those are the two things we are doing this time around. So to quickly do this, I'm going to just press the enter. So I'm going to do this just below the setup button. That's what we're going to do. So let's create this function. So what would this function be doing? Is going to be what? The submit button function. So once you click the submit button, it's going to trigger this function to happen. So that's what we're going to do. So how do we do that? We're simply going to say def. So what name are we going to be giving it? Student submit. So I'm going to simply say start underscore submit. That's the name of the function. So I've been giving it a name. It's going to take an argument of self, which we already know. So I'm going to put the colon, telling me that this is a function declaration. So what do I want to happen when I do this? So I simply want to insert students in the list. That's what I want. So once I click on this, okay, let me first of all insert the student in the database. So once I click this, I want to insert the student in the database table. I know we had earlier created the database. So how do we do this? How do you write an insert statement in SQL? How do you do this? You can do this no matter the database you're using, whether you're using MySQL, Oracle, or any relational database. This is the same thing you do. So I can simply say self dot. I make reference to the connection, which is what db.com. You already know this. So self.db.com. So what do I do once I've established this connection? I will do what? Execute. You execute the query. Just the way you did when you wanted to create a table. But this time around, what kind of SQL statements are you making? You are simply, instead of saying create table, we are simply going to say what? Insert. We want to insert into the table. So insert into. So what are we inserting into? Are we inserting into which table? So what's the name of the table? The name of the table is student. So we're inserting into student. What do we want to insert into student? What do we want to insert into student? We simply want to insert in the first name Then what again? We also want to insert in the second name. Those are the two things we are inserting. So I'll close up this bracket and I'll now come out. So what do we want to insert into them? What are we inserting into them? We are simply inserting some values. So I'm going to simply say values. So that is how you write this. So once I say values, I should be able to tell it the values to add up to. So what's going to be the value? The values are going to be what I will get from my self.fn entry. You know I already have my fn entry. So please, this should be in small letter. Self.fn entry. We already know we created this initially. So fn entry value. So that value that you get from the entry, which is the text field for first name, to get that value by saying .get. That's how you get it. So once you've gotten it, you should be able to add it. So I'm simply gonna say plus again, then this, and then this, and comma. So this is the syntax. You have to take note of the syntax. It looks difficult for us. Once you get it once, it becomes easy. I'm also gonna do dot again with this. Then I'm gonna say plus. The next thing we are adding is what? Self dot ln entry value, because it's first name and last name. So once I've done that, I'm going to say dot get is going to get the value. So once it does get this value, I'm going to now put this again. Close up this bracket. And that should be it. So that is how you do that. I'm going to press the enter key and come to the next line. So that's how you insert into the database. So having inserted into the database, I would like, once you insert it into the database, I want the thing to be cleared, the text field to be empty, so that in case you want to insert another thing. And to do that, I'm going to simply clear the entry box again. So immediately after inserting, you should be able to clear the entry boxes again. And to do that, it's very simple. You simply say you simply say self.fn underscore entry. So that's the text box. So I simply say dot delete, clear it. So that's what dot delete does. It does clear it for you. So I'm going to take the argument of 0 and what? End. So those are the two arguments in text for the dot delete. So I'm not clearing only the first name field. I'm also clearing the last name. So I'm simply say self dot ln underscore entry dot what? Delete. The same thing. So once I say dot delete takes argument of 0 and what? End. So with that, I've cleared the fields, the two text fields. So that's how you go about that. So what's the next thing I do after clearing the text fields? I should be able to update the list with student list. So that's the next thing we are going to do. We are going to update the list. That's the list box. When I mean the list, I mean the list box. Update the list box with the student list. So that's the next thing I do. And to do that, I simply call the function self dot update list box, which we've not created. We are going to create it very soon. First dot update underscore list box. So that does that for us. So the next thing we are going to do now is to write this very function update list box. Let's write this function so that when it is called, we can know what to do. So this function should be able to update the list box. So simply say, call it update underscore list box. That's the name of the function. And it's going to take in, like we all know, it's going to take in self. And if it takes in self, it's going to do the work. And for it to do this work, it's going to first of all delete items in the list box. That's the first thing it's going to do. And we all know that to delete item in the list box, we do it by simply say self dot list underscore box dot delete. That's how you do that. And once you delete, what argument you delete there? The text 0 and what? And will be in capital letter and small letter in quotes. Okay. So having done this, what next do we do? What next do we do? The next thing we're going to do is, because you want for it to update the list, but it has to delete everything that was initially there. So after doing that, it should now get, the next thing it will now do will be to get students from the database. So get the students from the database. That's the next thing. And to do this, how do we do this? I'm going to include this in a try catch block. So let's put it in a try catch block. So say try underscore. Anytime you want to get to the database, it's always good you put it in a try catch block. So I'm going to store everything that I'm getting from the database inside a variable called result. And to get it, I simply say self dot. I'm going to use the cursor variable that I had earlier created to transverse through and get what I want. So I simply say cursor dot execute. So executing what kind of SQL command that helps us to fetch what is inside the database? The SQL command that does that is statement that does that is the select. So you say select, and you are getting the ID. What else are we fetching? We are fetching the first name. What else are we fetching? We are fetching the last name. So we are getting all these from where? We are getting them from the table called what? Students. That's the name of the table. So once you are done with this, then it will do that for you. So that will retrieve it. So once you receive it, it's gonna hold this list in the result. So that's what it does. It's gonna hold it in the result. So holding it in the result. So how do we bring it out? You can simply say, you can use the for loop to go through them by saying the for row in the result. You want to transverse all of them, all the records that are available in the result. Say for row in result, what do you want to do? You want to simply say that the student underscore ID, that means the ID of the student is a variable that is going to take in for row 1. That's the initial row. Then the second row is going to be stored underscore fname, and it's going to take in everything that is in row what? That the second row should be row 1, since the first row is row 0. Then finally, we're going to take the what? Stored underscore what? lname, and it's going to take the values for row what? Row 2. So that's how you transverse through the records in the database. So after transversing, now you need to take what you've seen and put them inside the list box. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So we're trying to put the students in the list box. So after looking at all of them, put them inside the list box so that you can see them. And to do that, we simply say what? Self dot list underscore box dot insert. That's the command insert. So what and what are you inserting? We are simply inserting the stored ID, stored underscore ID. That's the first thing. So after putting the stored ID, what else do we put? We also put the stored underscore what? First name, isn't it? So we also put, very importantly, put the stored underscore last name. So once we are done with that, then that statement is okay. But because we'll pass this through a try catch block, a try block, try is going to take except in case if there is an error, say except. What kind of error are we expecting? SQLi 3, like we did before, operational error. That's the kind of error we're expecting. That means if this operation is not able to be carried out on the database. So what we want to see, we simply want it to, if it's not able to happen, simply print to us that the table doesn't exist. That's the message you want to be printed out. If there is no table like that to perform all these operations. Let's say you want to perform this operation, but nobody has added, there's no record in the table already. So apart from this kind of error, let's also expect another kind of error, or a much more general error. And let this error just print out that it's going to simply print out 1. Couldn't retrieve data from database. So let's say there was a table, but still you could not retrieve data from database. Couldn't retrieve data from database. So that's what the second error does. So with that, we are done with this. So I can simply say Control S to save. So we are done with both submitting a data and updating the list. So in subsequent class, we are going to be looking at loading the list box with selected students into entries. And that is where we're going to be stopping. So once we write that code, our application should work effectively. Or should we just continue and finish it up? What time do we have? Yeah, still have time. So let's continue and finish it up. So let's write up the last code. So what is this gonna do? This is gonna load the leaks box This is simply going to load list box selected. This box selected student into the entry. So when we say entries, it simply means the text box. So once you click on any student in the list box, we want the information to be loaded to the entry so that you can you can update. So that's the essence of this. So to write this, I simply say dev. So what are we going to call it? We are going to call it load students, load underscore students. You can see because we've already mentioned this function somewhere else. So load underscore students. So what is it going to take? It's going to take self. And because this is going to happen when you click on something, this is actually an event. So let's equate this event to initially none. So when I come out, I'll put this, then I'll start writing the code. So first of all, what we're going to do is that we are going to get index selected, which is the student ID. Okay. So how do we do that? Simply say that so let's give it a variable name. I'll be widget. And let it take the value of event dot widget because we are trying to click. We want to have a click event. So once we do that, we can simply say now that index is equal to, you know that the things written are actually strings. It's going to take that variable that we created, which is what? LB underscore widget. So we say dot cursor selection. So I'm going to be explaining this code more deeper, but let's just get it done and get it to do what we want it to do first. So that is going to do it for us. Let me make sure the spellings are right. Okay. So having done this, I'm going to simply store the current student index. That's what I'm going to do next. And to do this, I'm going to simply say self dot core underscore student. We already know about this variable. We're going to assign in the value of the index which we have found. Then having done this, we are going to do the last thing, which is to now retrieve student list from the database. So we're going to retrieve the student list from the database. So how do we retrieve the student list from the database? We're going to do it using a try catch block. I'm going to simply say try and put everything in a result. If I say try and I say result equal to self dot the variable we know, which is the cursor, because we're using tcursor to transverse. Anytime you want to transverse, that's what you use it to do. That transversing simply means going through all the records. So you say dot execute. So what do we want it to be? We want to be done. We simply want to use the word select statement of MySQL by saying select ID. The only ID that we're picking now. We also pick the first name. Then after picking the first name, what next do we put? Last name. Then where are we picking them from? We're picking them from the table known as what? Student. That's the name of the table. And which particular record do we want to pick? Which particular record do we want to pick? No, we are going to be doing it one by one, so it's not going to be all of them. So we are going to be picking where the ID is equal to where the ID is equal to what? We are picking where the ID is equal to the index that we are looking at. So that is where we are picking. So take note of that. Is you have to concatenate this. So where the ID is equal to index. So with that, we've done justice to that. So what else do we do? We are not going to do this for as many as the fields that we have. So to do that, I'm going to write this simple comment by saying, you will now receive a list of the list. I say you now receive a list of the what? Lists that hold the result. That's what we've done. So to do this, I can simply use the for loop for that. So I say for row, just like we did before, for row in result. For row in result, what do we want to do? We want to take the stored underscore ID variable and give it a value that is gotten from the what? First row, which is row 0. So after doing that, I'm gonna do also what? Stored underscore fname. This we already did this when we are doing the other submitting. And it's equal to what? What is gotten from what? Row 1. Then we're also gonna say stored underscore what? Last name. What value are we assigning it? What is gotten from row 2, which is actually the third row. Okay. So once we are done, then it should work perfectly. So we'll now simply set values in the entry. So we set values in the entry. So you've read all this thing out from the database, then you have to set it in the entry so that somebody can see them and work on them. To do that, you simply say self.fn entry value. So dot set, that's the function that you use. So what are you setting it to? You're actually setting it to stored underscore what? First name for the first one. Stored underscore first name. And that is for the first one. For the second one, you do the same thing, self dot, this time around, ln entry value dot what? Set. And what are we setting to? We are setting the what? Stored underscore last name. So with that, once you click on the list board, the information should come out on the entry. But because we are using a try-catch block, what do we do? If there's an error, what do we expect? So simply accept, write accept. If there's an error and this action could not be done, simply say accept SQL3 dot operations. Operational error, we already know about this error. And we just want something printed out. So what do we want to be printed out? Simply want it to say that the table does not exist. The table doesn't exist. That's what we want to be printed out. So apart from this error, let's also accept any general error that could be due to the database by simply saying accept print what are we printing? We are printing that could not retrieve data from the database. Couldn't retrieve data from the database. If I do Control S, please, this should be inside here. I don't know why it came out. I'm gonna cut this, put it inside here. So that's what we want to print it out. So I'm gonna simply save this. So with this, we are good to go. So I'm gonna quickly round up now so that in the next class, we are gonna create the update student info function and run our code. That's what we'll do. We'll create the update student info code and run our code. So please check through your code. Make sure you're not making a mistake. This is pretty complicated, but that's the kind of code you write when you have a list box and you want to go through the list box and bring and make updating. So go through the code, then in subsequent lecture, we'll be able to round up. So what's the time now? 11:38. So by sharp 12, we'll round up and see what this code looks like by sharp